James Edward Wood was convicted and sentenced to death in 1993 for the kidnapping and murder of an 11-year-old Idaho girl, Jeralee Underwood. James Wood has been credited with at least 85 rapes, 185 robberies, and dozens of murders. James Wood was born James Godwin on December 9, 1947, in Pensacola, Florida. His father was an alcoholic and went to prison in Fort Leavenworth. Soon after, James's mother took him and his brother and moved to Idaho. When James was 8 years old, he witnessed the tragic death of his mother, who passed in a fire while saving 2 other workers at a potato warehouse in Rupert, Idaho. Wood said that he had tried to put his arms around the waist of a nearby woman, who, instead of consoling him, shoved him away. Many people say that act caused him to develop a hatred towards women and was worse whenever they resembled the woman who had brushed him off as a scared child. After the tragedy, James Godwin was adopted by his aunt and uncle in Idaho Falls, who changed his name to James Edward Wood. This is when Wood claimed to have been abused both physically and mentally, and that it caused him to lash out frequently. Because of his acting out, his adoptive parents, aunt and uncle, sent him to the Idaho Youth Training Center in St. Anthony, Idaho. His father was released from prison in 1963 and offered to take care of James. And Wood boarded the first bus to Shreveport, Louisiana, to live with his father. Wood then moved to Missouri for flight school. There he met and married a woman in 1966. Wood says that shortly after his marriage, he began raping women in Missouri and Illinois. James was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment at the Louisiana State Penitentiary for breaking and entering, stabbing, and attempted rape of 2 women. He would be paroled on August 18, 1971, for good behavior. In the 1970s, Wood got a job as a truck driver, traveling cross-country. James then married a woman from Shreveport and was arrested for raping a woman in Lincoln Parish and was convicted and given a few years in jail until November 6, 1986, when he was released for good behavior. James moved back to Shreveport in 1987 and married a woman named Yvonne. They had a son in 1989. Between 1986 and 1992, Wood held several jobs and no crimes were linked to him. He then moved to Grand Cane, Louisiana, then was forced to leave after a 14-year-old relative of his wife filed a police report saying that he had raped her at the photo lab where he worked. That is when Wood headed back to Idaho, where he had some relatives. In October 1992, on the way to Idaho, he passed through a suburb in St. Louis, Missouri, where he kidnapped 18-year-old Jamie Mazengill. Wood took her to a forest, where he raped and shot her in the head. Thankfully, she survived. Wood arrived in Idaho on November 1st and moved in with a cousin in Chubbuck, Idaho. A year later, on June 29, 1993, he lured 11-year-old newspaper carrier Jeralee Underwood to his car while she was on her daily route in Pocatello, Idaho. Wood kidnapped her at gunpoint and shot her with a .22 caliber revolver the following day. Wood kept her body for over a week before finally disposing of her remains in the Snake River. Jeralee's remains was found by searchers that had been looking for her 8 days after her murder. On July 7, Officer Scott Shaw arrested James Wood, who readily admitted to Underwood's murder, as well as 2 other rapes and several robberies committed days after her murder. A total of 12 charges were filed against him, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, and the 2 rapes. A short time after his arrest, Wood admitted to the 1976 kidnapping and murder of 33-year-old Shirley Coleman in Greenwood, Louisiana. Shirley Coleman's skeletal remains were found in a rural area west of Shreveport on January 7, 1981. Wood pleaded guilty to the Underwood murder in September, and for the rest of his life, Wood was housed on death row at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution in Kuna, Idaho, where he passed away from suspected natural causes on February 1, 2004, after complaining about breathing problems earlier in the day.